It is great to be with you. It's great to have a room full of Texans here in Washington, a burst of sanity in an otherwise crazy place. These are interesting times. These are times that have enormous challenges, but also enormous opportunities. And, I will say, looking back at the first year and 3 months of the Republican administration, of Republican majorities in both houses, I'm gratified with what we've been able to get done. We entered 2017 with enormous opportunities, but also enormous risks. And at the outset of the year, I laid out 4 big priorities that I thought Congress and the administration should focus on: tax reform, regulatory reform, Obamacare, and judges. And my view was if we could deliver on all 4 of those, it would be a big, big deal. It would make a lasting impact for the country. And if we fell short on all 4 of them, it would be an enormous and heartbreaking missed opportunity. And for a lot of last year, it was not clear which one it was going to be, as it seemed like Republicans were running around in a circle with their heads cut off. But by the end of the year, I was gratified to see the conference come together and deliver some real results. The biggest substantive result from last year is the tax cut that was passed in December of last year. And it is far-reaching, it is historic. We've seen over 4 million Americans who've gotten pay raises, who've gotten bonuses as a result of this. We've seen companies all over Texas, all over the country, and announcing new investments, billions of dollars in new factories and new facilities, billions of dollars of new investment in their pension funds. The tax cuts on the business side took our corporate rate from 35%, which was the highest in the developed world, and brought it down to 21%, which suddenly makes America competitive on the global stage and attractive to bring companies, to bring capital back. It moves to a territorial system which incentivizes U.S. companies to bring $2.9 trillion in capital that they had already overseas, bring that back for America. That's good for Texas. That's good for Texas because we're seeing that money being invested in Texas. We're seeing those jobs being created in Texas. On the small business side, we cut taxes for small businesses, including allowing for immediate expensing of capital expenditure, which is powerfully pro-growth. Encourages businesses to invest in new factories, farmers to buy a new tractor, produces yet more jobs and economic opportunity. On the individual side, the tax cut lowers every marginal tax rate. It doubles the standard deduction from $12,000 a couple to $24,000 a couple, which means starting next year, 90% of American taxpayers will be able to fill out their taxes on a postcard. Now that's a big deal. Personally, I think it should be 100%. I think we should keep going to a simple flat tax and abolish the IRS. But 90% is a pretty good start. 90% is a big improvement from where we are right now. It doubles the child tax credit, which makes a huge difference from $1,000 per child per year to $2,000 per child per year. For working families, that makes an enormous, enormous difference. And for a lot of last year, it wasn't clear if we were going to get the tax cut passed or not. There were 1,000 ways this thing could have gone off the rails. And I spent literally thousands of hours last year trying to bring Republicans together and get us to yes. And it was a big, big win, and a big, big win for the American people. On regulatory reform, we've seen across the board federal regulations reducing job-killing regulations. I hear every day from small business owners across Texas that they're optimistic, they're energized, they feel good, they're investing capital, they're creating jobs, that they're not facing a federal regulatory environment where the regulators view business and job creators as the enemy. And that has yet another dramatic impact on Texas. With regard to Obamacare, Obamacare remains the single biggest unfinished promise. But it's worth noting, as a part of tax reform, we did repeal the individual mandate, which is a big step towards repealing Obamacare. The individual mandate was one of the most unfair, cruel aspects of Obamacare. Every year, the IRS fines about 6.5 million Americans because they can't afford health insurance. Of those, about 1 million are in Texas. About 80% earn $50,000 a year or less. About 40% earn $25,000 a year or less. So if you think about it, if you're a single mom, you're working 2 jobs, you're working your fingers to the bone, you're not even making $25,000 a year. You can't afford health insurance because premiums have skyrocketed under Obamacare. And to add insult to injury, the IRS comes along and fines you because you can't afford health insurance. It's one of the factors that led Bill Clinton to describe Obamacare as the craziest thing in the world. Might be the only time I agreed with Bill Clinton. And we were able to bring the Republican conference together to repeal that individual mandate, which is real and meaningful tax relief for the 6.5 million Americans getting fined by the IRS. And it also produced substantial tax savings for the federal government, so we were able to devote that to lowering individual tax rates. It's what paid, for example, for doubling the child tax credit and for lowering marginal rates so that Texans across our state are keeping a lot more of what they earn. And then fourth, judges. Judges, I think, have been an enormous success of the last year. You've got Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, who I think is terrific. All of us who care about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, care about free speech and religious liberty and the Second Amendment. The courts are right at the junction of all of those. But not only Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, but last year the Senate confirmed 12 Federal Court of Appeals judges. That is the most in the first term of a president in history. Obama had 4 in his first year. We had 12. So looking back on the major priorities, I think we delivered to a remarkable degree. Now, what does that mean going forward in 2018? I think we need to keep working to deliver on our promises. The unifying theme of all of those is my overarching priority. My focus each and every day is jobs, jobs, jobs. And it's the same thing y'all are focused on, because you guys work for the same people I do. Y'all are listening to the same Texans, and what's amazing, all across Texas is the consistency. East Texas, West Texas, the Panhandle, the Valley. Texans' top priority is jobs. We want more jobs, we want higher wages, we want more opportunity. That's why 1,000 people a day are moving to Texas. Because Texas is where the jobs are, and as long as we're reducing taxes, simplifying the tax code, lifting regulations, allowing job creators to grow and flourish, Texas is going to continue to rise and rise and rise. And with that, why don't I open it up to questions? Happy to talk about any topics y'all like.
Yeah, Senator, I'm Rick Callahan from Dallas. The challenges we have in Dallas are transportation oriented. We have just simply got to get out of this conundrum of not having enough financing. We have a challenge on LBJ East. We've got challenges, all throughout the state highway network and the federal highway network. What will you do to provide leadership to get the necessary dollars needed to fix that?
Well, on transportation and infrastructure, I think there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of appetite in Congress to move forward with an infrastructure bill. I think Republicans want to do that. I think Democrats want to do that. I know the President wants to do that. I think there's still a lot of fluidity and ambiguity in what the details will be, what the substance will be. Transportation, undoubtedly a critical federal role. But the devil is in the details. One question is just simply what the total cost is. We've heard numbers that range anywhere from $200 billion to $1.5 trillion. Those are very, very different numbers. How it's paid for matters a lot. Those issues are still being actively debated. The degree to which you're talking about federal dollars or federal plus state or federal plus a private-public partnership, that combination, those details are still very much being debated as well. I think the appetite is there to move forward. I'll tell you what I've been focusing on in the Commerce Committee. is using infrastructure as a vehicle for reg reform. And this is something we've heard from mayors and local leaders all the time. The way I try to put it is real simple. It doesn't do any good to spend billions of dollars on roads and bridges if you can't get a permit to build the dang road or bridge. And I think when it comes to reg reform, there are a number of reforms in terms of streamlining the permit process, making it move faster, bringing it to one place instead of 10 places, that we can do that as a freestanding matter of reg reform would likely face a Democratic filibuster. But as a part of infrastructure package, may well be able to get the votes to go forward. So I can't promise you Congress will move forward on infrastructure. Listen, this place, the partisan division is greater than I've ever seen in my lifetime. And so it is entirely possible that nothing moves. But I will say there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of appetite on both sides to move it forward, and I'm trying to move it forward with reg reform as a critical component.
You think managed lanes will be a part of that answer?
Short answer is I don't know. Let me ask y'all, what do y'all think on that?
I think there's some action.
The problem that, so I represent all 635 that goes through Garland is in my district.
Okay.
The problem that we have is the President's administration, Secretary Chow, has come out in favor of public-private partnerships and toll roads. Nobody in my district has ever complained about managed toll lanes. They are willing, as part of conservative fiscal principles of 50 years, to pay more on a day where they want to get somewhere faster. But the problem that we have is, and I don't know how we resolve this, and I don't know what role that you can play in this, is that, at the upper levels of the state government, we have opposition to that. Dan Patrick, Governor Abbott opposed that kind of tolling. We can't get anything done. So my concern is there's going to be something that comes out of the federal side that says, great, we're in it to win it. Here's the money we can put towards it, but you need a public-private partnership. And then somebody at the upper levels of Texas is going to say, so sorry. And then I've got hundreds of manufacturers in my district who are going to go somewhere else because they can't get their goods to market.
So, listen, what I would say on that, I am a strong believer in federalism. I'm a strong believer that we should be empowering the states and local governments to make as many decisions as possible and not be dictating things out of Washington. When it comes to Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick, both are good friends of mine. I worked for Abbott 5.5 years. We worked together very, very closely. One of the reasons we work together so well is all three of us manage, by and large, not to mess in each other's business. And so we got a lot of fights here in Washington, and the governor and lieutenant governor rarely come up and tell Congress how to resolve federal issues. And I think on the flip side, I try very much to respect the governor, lieutenant governor, and the state legislature's prerogatives to make decisions on the state side. So from a federal perspective, we'll make resources available, but the states are going to have a lot of leeway in how they're spent. I think that's how it should be. And so to the extent there are disagreements between the municipalities and the state government, that's something that needs to be worked out. But I don't think the Fed should come in and try to Bigfoot it and resolve it. I think that's something that has to be worked out cooperatively for it to be implemented in a way that's going to work. Yeah.
Senator, I agree with you. The situation, and when Congress gets the infrastructure bill, what the White House has been looking at has been very much a North Texas model of what we've done in North Texas. We've solved these problems. We're not actually looking for money. We're just looking for authority. So the more that Congress can do to deliver money directly to the locals, let us make our own decisions. This conundrum that the council mentions really is 2,000 elected officials in North Texas that agree, and we've got 2 in Austin that are disagreeing with us. And we're not looking to create toll roads. We're looking to create more options, more transit conduits, and to build systems that we know that work. The congestion in North Texas right now has not grown in the last 4 or 5 years, even though our population keeps going up, because our systems are working. And you compare us to Austin, San Antonio, and Houston, our systems are much better designed and working much better. They're our model. And to be able to continue go forward the way we've been doing is really the answer. So empowering us to make our local decisions is the best thing that could help for us.
Well, and if you have specific ideas on steps in the infrastructure bill in terms of empowering either states or local governments that would be helpful, Let me ask my team, you guys introduce yourself real quick.
Sean McClain, Senate Commerce Committee for Senator Cruz. Brian Basher, also handles Senate Commerce. Austin Smith, Senate handle energy and some infrastructure issues as well. Tanner, I do meetings.
So these guys are reach out to them. That they are very much engaged in the substance and details, and their job, our collective job, is to work for you. I'll mention also, Austin, in addition to that, one of the things that we have been in daily contact with a lot of municipalities and county judges over is Hurricane Harvey. And I guess most of the folks here are more kind of North Texas or West Texas. We don't have a lot of Gulf Coast here. But, well, what I can tell you is one of the things that we did in the wake of Harvey. I mean, as Harvey was in the Gulf, I was on the phone with mayors and county judges up and down the Gulf Coast, and we were on an hourly basis in contact with them throughout the recovery basis. And then I reassigned a number of my staff to nothing but full-time Harvey relief. And so Austin, who's a lawyer and senior policy aide, I moved him over where he's doing Harvey relief all day long. So he is talking with, primarily on the Gulf Coast because that's where the damage is, but with mayors and county judges and police chiefs and fire chiefs and all the folks on the ground. We want to hear from you in terms of specific ideas that would be beneficial, and that's the team is there. Apparently, they all wear light blue ties. So I didn't even realize I got that email.
Well, all this talk a lot, sir, and I know that all of them reported very favorably of the responses they were getting through your office.
Good.
And through your help.
Good. Well, it was incredible seeing Texas really come together. That was. I've never been prouder to be a Texan than watching how the state came through that and just rose through the storm. And it was inspirational. Yeah.
Senator Chris Watson in Texas. With 1,000 people moving into our state a day, primarily a lot of them in North Texas, our struggle is affordable housing. And one of the keys that we use in our city for affordable housing is CDBG funds and home funds. So I would certainly encourage you to support an increase in those funds with the discretionary funding increase that we have, because that's the way we provide housing for seniors, housing for those that need rental assistance, avoiding foreclosure and homelessness. So I really appreciate your leadership in that, and which just sort of toss that out there for your consideration.
Well, I appreciate that, and CDBG has been a huge part of how on the federal level we've responded to Harvey, and that's been a big component.
That's correct, yes.
On that front, we've had 3 major hurricane relief bills that came through Congress. The first came through the House right in the aftermath of the storms. Came out of the House at $7.5 billion. In the Senate, John Cornyn and I teamed up, and we doubled that to $15.25 billion. And the principal increase there was about another $7.5 billion in CDBG funds that we added to that. There was a second tranche that was over $30 billion. Much of that was focused on flood insurance in the second major bill. And then the third major bill we passed was the one most recently that came out of the House at $81 billion. And again in the Senate, Cornyn and I teamed up and improved that bill substantially. We increased it from $81 billion to $89 billion. And importantly, one of the things we did on that is we changed the formulas and allocations so that Texas would get a much larger share. I mean, the bill focuses on Harvey and Irma and Maria. You had 3 horrible storms within the course of a few weeks. But the initial the initial allocations, Texas was not getting, I think, our fair share. And in the Senate, we were able to lean in and shift it. Harvey was, federal estimates are, the second most damaging disaster in the history of this country. And so I thought it was critical that the state of Texas receive a fair share of the federal disaster relief. Another big chunk of that $89 billion. Austin, how much of that 89 was CDBG? Do you remember the number off the top of your head?
The exact number, I'd have to look back, but we did, as you said, significantly increase the funding available, particularly for mitigation that comes through CDBG. The look back formula, we shortened that, so it would only go back to storms that occurred in 2014 as opposed to going all the way back to Hurricane Sandy.
So we also increased by 50% the funding for the Army Corps of Engineers, which in particular gives long-term flood mitigation and disaster relief, gives funding for things like potentially beginning construction of a third reservoir in the Houston area, which could have saved a lot of damage if that had built, and a number of other mitigation projects that are underway. A final disaster piece that we passed was targeted tax relief. And in the Senate, I took the lead on that, introduced the bill with Cornyn and Rubio. In the House, it was Kevin Brady who carried the bill, and it did 4 things for the victims of Harvey. Number one, it allowed anyone whose home was damaged to deduct the property casualty losses on their taxes without being subject to the ordinary limit of 10% of adjusted gross income. Number two, it allowed people whose homes were damaged to withdraw from their retirement savings, to withdraw from 401k or IRA to rebuild their homes without paying the ordinary 10% early withdrawal penalty. Number three, it created incentives nationwide for people to give to charities doing hurricane relief. Both corporations and individuals were exempted from the ordinary limits on charitable giving if you were giving to organizations that were doing hurricane relief. And then number four, for the companies, there were so many employers up and down the coast in Texas who kept paying their employees, even though they couldn't come into work, even though the business may have been underwater, their homes may have been underwater, they kept the paychecks going anyway. And so the tax relief provided a tax credit to those employers for continuing to pay their employees during the crisis. And that legislation, it was Cruz, Cornyn, and Rubio, passed both houses, and the president signed it. It was about $5.5 billion in targeted tax relief for those impacted by Harvey and Irma and Maria. So all of which is to say I was really gratified to see the cooperation and bipartisan unity we had dealing with these disasters, even in the face of nasty political fights on a lot of other fronts. It was good to see us come together.
Senator, I'd like, John Love, in Texas, I'd like to double down on what the gentleman said. Housing is really, really a big issue.
I've tried to get a hotel in Midland. I know what you mean.
And we know that a hotel in Midland, Texas is more expensive than in New York City or Washington, D.C. And so we're having some serious...
And besides that, you get to be in Midland, Texas.
We're having some serious challenges, and on top of 1,000 people a day coming, we have an economy that expands or contracts based on the price of oil. And then oil was around $90. We had people renting out their couches for $1,000 a week. And it's really, 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 really hurting West Texas. So yes, I'd like to say please support CDBG funds as well as look for alternatives. And also transportation. Regional transportation in West Texas is at a disadvantage because right now with TxDOT we're looking to do a regional transportation study because the truck routes that are happening in Texas are not getting counted. So our infrastructure is deteriorating a lot faster than the rest of the country.
Well, and the heavy trucks going in and out of the Permian, what's going on there is incredible, and it's driving unbelievable economic growth. But you're right, the infrastructure is barely hanging on.
And we were a victim of our own success because as oil companies got leaner and smarter and started using technology, now they can make profit on $32 per barrel,
Yep.
which is scary.
Well, it's a good indication. You know, a lot of us in Texas went through the kind of early and mid 80s. Some of the young folks that just came in, y'all won't remember this, but I remember in the mid to late 80s, oil prices cratered. And Texas went into a full-on depression. It wasn't even a recession. I mean, I'm from Houston, and I mean, you had office buildings, skyscrapers that were just empty. I think there were tumbleweeds blowing through the hallways. And the problem in Texas, as you'll remember, is when oil cratered, it caused the banking sector to crater, which caused real estate to crater, and our whole state was hurting and hurting mightily. It is an interesting shift. We just went through going from $100 oil to $40 oil, which was a big shot. And I was gratified at how our state took that gut shot and not only didn't go into a recession, but kept on growing. It's a real testament to how diversified Texas has been. That 30, 40 years ago, we were in one industry state. It's like the old line, what kind of music do you like? I like both kinds, country and western. At the time, it was oil and gas. But you look at now how our state, the economy is so incredibly diversified. whether it is technology, whether it is healthcare, whether it is real estate. We've got so many other sectors that, yeah, look, if the energy sector takes a hit, all of Texas feels it. But there's enough other, at this point, we are such a diversified economy that when oil went down, that may get hurt, but the petrochemical guys were doing great because their inputs were plummeting. And that diversity, I think, helped our state be much, much stronger than it was. And you're also right that the effect of it was that it let the oil and gas guys really drive down their internal costs to get a lot more efficient so that they can now produce at a much lower price point. And that makes, I mean, Texas is driving literally the global energy market. And it is incredible. I will tell you, when it comes to infrastructure, one very important piece of infrastructure is pipelines. And that has been something I've been pressing hard to streamline, to make it easier to build pipelines. And let me also connect all of this to NAFTA renegotiation. So NAFTA renegotiation is going on right now. Look, a lot of Texans are concerned about the direction it'll go. Count me as one of them. I'm concerned about the direction it'll go. I think within the Trump administration, I think there are conflicting voices on NAFTA and trade. There's some voices that want to use NAFTA renegotiation as an avenue for opening up foreign markets, for opening up the Mexican and Canadian markets and creating more trade. I think that's a great outcome. I think that is a terrific outcome for Texas. There are other voices that want to use NAFTA renegotiation to erect barriers to trade, close off the American markets and reduce the volume of international trade. I think that would be profoundly harmful to Texas. So what I've been doing is energetically urging the president, urging the administration to listen to the first voices and not the second. And in particular, what I've encouraged, I think the best opportunity for NAFTA renegotiation is the Mexican energy markets. And, you know, some of y'all may have seen, there's a very famous satellite photo of the Korean Peninsula. And the Korean Peninsula, South Korea, which has free enterprise, is brightly lit up. And literally from outer space, the satellites can see the prosperities, people are doing well. And North Korea, there's no meaningful geographic line, but North Korea, you could see like the finger of God drew a line. That north of that line, it's just pitch black. And it's literally the darkness of communism, that it doesn't work, and the poverty and lack of material well-being. What's interesting is there is a similar photograph that far fewer people have seen, a satellite photograph of South Texas. And you look at the Eagle Ford Shale. Eagle Ford Shale is producing enormous prosperity and abundance in South Texas. Eagle Ford doesn't end at the Rio Grande River, but the developments do. And if you look at the satellite photo, you see north of the Rio Grande, it all lit up as the Eagle Ford's being developed. You hit the Rio Grande and it goes much darker because those resources aren't being developed. So what I've encouraged the administration to do is use NAFTA renegotiation to open up that Mexican energy market. President Peña Nieto, the Mexican president, has leaned forward in terms of wanting to open up the energy markets there, use NAFTA renegotiation to codify those reforms, and take them further. And doing that is a win-win. That would produce thousands of high-paying jobs in Mexico, would benefit Mexico. But naturally, the place they would look for the expertise on how to develop those resources is Texas. And so that would produce thousands of high-paying jobs for us as well. And so that loops me back to where I started, which is my focus every day is jobs, jobs, jobs. And if we're doing that, we're doing our job right. And with that, I'm getting the hook to head to the next event. But let me just say thank you guys for being here. And you know, welcome to Washington, a city that combines Southern efficiency with Northern hospitality.